Isn't it amazing what some people will or will not believe? It sometimes seems that the things that are real get cast off as if they're fiction. And the things that are untrue, people believe them. You can see that just in your news feed if you're on Facebook. All the things that people fall for, we're saying, really? You actually believe that? We believe the fake stuff, and the real stuff, we throw it out and say, nah, who would believe that kind of stuff? Years ago, I was having a conversation with someone who held a fairly high position in another religion, and just so you know, this person actually invited me to have this conversation with them because they were going to convert me to believe their way. So they invited me to have this conversation about what they believed. We were discussing what this person believed, and I was asking pointed questions, which highlighted the inconsistencies and obvious errors in the religion. Now, I don't know if this was the first time this individual realized that they had fallen for a bag of lies, or if they already knew that before calling me in. But before our conversation was over, their final words to me were, I know that you can prove my religion wrong, but I'm going to believe it anyway. I know that you can prove my beliefs wrong, but I'm going to believe it anyway. Think about that for a moment. The person wasn't saying, I know you don't believe the same way I do, but you're never going to convince me that I'm wrong because I believe what I believe. They actually said, even if I know I'm wrong, I'm still going to believe it. Talk about an April Fool. What this person said was much different than someone saying, no one really knows for sure what's true, so everybody has to choose their own path. Maybe all paths lead to God. There are people that believe that, and I can kind of almost understand that. It doesn't mean what they're saying is true, but I can kind of understand that. But this person was saying, even if I know I'm wrong, I'm still going to believe it. Years ago, people believed the world was flat. Almost everybody believed the world was flat. Because some people say, well, you know what? You're in the minority. Christians are a minority in the world. With all the other religions out there, Christians are a minority. Don't you think that since so many other people believe differently, you could be wrong? Well, just because you have a majority believing something doesn't make it true. The majority of the world believed the world was flat. But they were dead wrong. And it took somebody actually having a different belief to say, you know what? I don't care what you think. I believe it's round, and I'm going to prove it's round. And we can't always even believe our senses. Because it made sense the world was flat, because how many have been to the ocean? You've looked out there across the ocean, and it looks like it goes so far, and it just flats off. So even our perception can sometimes be off. What we see with our eyes is not always what's actually there. Most people, though, are really looking for truth. Most people are not looking for truth, What they're looking for is something that agrees with what they would like to be true. How many would agree with that? Most people really don't want to be corrected. What they want is they want to find somebody that agrees with them. Even if they're wrong, they want somebody that shares their belief. So they can say, aha, see, that person agrees with me. I must be right. They reject anything that doesn't agree with the way they would like things to be. Even though deep down inside, they think maybe I'm wrong, or maybe they even say, I know I'm wrong, but I don't want to be wrong, so I'm going to keep holding on to this. That's kind of what that guy was saying to me, the story I told earlier. Well, today is Easter, and it's also April Fool's Day. And I was trying to decide, do I preach an Easter message, or do I preach an April Fool's message? So I decided I'm going to try to kind of combine the two together this morning. But we're going to talk mostly about Easter. Today I want to talk about some foolish people that made appearances in the Easter story. Psalms chapter 14 verse 1 says, the fool says in his heart, there is no God. Paul talks about those foolish people that David just talked about in the Psalms in Romans chapter 1. He says, there's no good excuse to not believe. Okay, David said, the fool says there is no God. Paul says, there's no good reason to not believe because God has put evidence of himself everywhere. He put his fingerprints on all creation. Romans chapter 1 verse 20 says, for since the creation of the world, God's invisible qualities, his eternal power and divine nature have been clearly seen, being understood from what has been made, so that people are without excuse. I don't know how anyone can look out and see creation and not believe in God. I don't know how people can look out there and actually think that everything happened by accident. It was just a series of accidents, one after the other, that made that all happen. I don't know about you, but I've seen very few accidents that actually create something better than what it was before. Accidents usually cause damage. They don't create something that's better. We look out there and we understand. We look out there and we see it and we go, oh man, isn't it great what God created? In fact, we even sing about it. One of the old hymns of the church says, oh Lord my God, when I in awesome wonder consider all the worlds thy hands have made. I see the stars. I hear the rolling thunder, thy power throughout the universe displayed. Another verse of that song says, when through the woods and forest glades I wander, and hear the birds sing sweetly in the trees. When I look down from lofty mountains' grandeur and see the brook and feel the gentle breeze, then what do we say? Then sings my soul, my Savior God to thee. How great thou art. Most of us in this room understand that. We look out there, we see all of that, we go, man, there's got to be a plan behind this. There had to be somebody who did this. This couldn't happen by accident. And what kind of being could actually create all this? Not just a normal being. It has to be somebody that's above everything else. Somebody with more wisdom than everybody else. We say there's got to be a God. I don't know how anyone can look at it and not believe there's a God. Yet some people do. Some people are so determined that God's a fairy tale that they refuse to admit that nothing but God makes any sense. I mean, if you really boil down all the stories and you keep asking questions about all the theories, and they create more questions than they do answers. But the biggest problem is that most of those who believe that there is no God are not even willing to put their theories to the test. They just believe it. It's what they've been taught. It's what they want to be true. So they just teach it without even researching it to see if it's really true or not. They've already determined that they're right and won't accept any other view, even if they're proven wrong. One group of people that's prominent in the Easter story and the events leading up to Easter are the Jewish religious leaders. In fact, they were the ones that demanded that Jesus be crucified. Although they were waiting for the Messiah, they refused to believe that Jesus was the Messiah because they had their own preconceived ideas of what the Messiah would look like and what he would do. So when somebody came doing something different than what they thought it should be, they said, no, this isn't him. We're going to reject him. Instead of actually researching it, see, if they had just gone back to their own readings, if they had just gone back to all the prophecies, all the stuff that they claimed to know so well, if they really would have gone back and studied that and compared that with what Jesus was doing, they would have seen the truth. But they kept believing the lie because they refused to go back and compare it and say, could this really be? Even after the resurrection, they refused to believe. They were so determined that Jesus was not the Messiah that they tampered with the evidence. And they even paid people to say that the body had been stolen. That's what history says. You don't actually see that part in the Bible, but history, you go back and study the historians of that day. And they actually went and paid people, paid the Roman guards. The Roman guards should have been put to death because they fell asleep on the job. But they were not put to death because the Roman officials and the Jewish leaders needed them to spread a lie that the disciples had come and overpowered them and stolen the body. So they lied in order to keep a lie alive. To not believe in God when all of the evidence proves otherwise is foolish. But I want to talk about something today that's even more foolish than that. Today I want to talk about those who know the truth and yet live their lives in a manner that is inconsistent with the truth that they know. There are people in the story of Easter that knew beyond a shadow of a doubt who Jesus was, but they still refused to take a stand for the truth. Let's look first at Pilate. Pilate was the governor of the Roman province of Judea where Jesus lived. Now, if you're here last Sunday, we talked about the fact that under the Roman Empire, only a Roman official could declare the death of someone. So the Jewish leaders needed a Roman official. Pilate was the Roman governor over that area. They needed him or somebody above him to actually declare the death sentence on Jesus. So they wanted to get rid of Jesus. Since they had no authority to do so, they brought him to Pilate. They did a trial where they even paid witnesses to come and testify against him and to tell lies. That part is in the Bible. People told lies. They actually committed perjury in court because they were paid to do so, to tell lies, so they could have a reason to convict this innocent man. If you read through the accounts of the trials, you find that a lot of things went on in that trial that shouldn't have taken place. But they were bound and determined to get rid of him. But Pilate saw through all those lies. In fact, the more Pilate questioned Jesus, and the more he questioned the false witnesses about Jesus, the more convinced he was that Jesus really was the Son of God. In fact, one of the accounts of the story says that as the people kept coming and sharing false testimony, their testimonies didn't line up. They were contradicting each other, and Pilate saw through that. In John chapter 19, verses 7 through 22, it says the Jewish leaders insisted. They said, "We have a law, and according to that law, he must die," because he claimed to be the Son of God. Well, if he wasn't the Son of God, then their law would say he should be put to death. But he actually was the Son, so there was no reason to put him to death. Now, when Pilate heard them say that he claims to be the Son of God, it says Pilate was even more afraid. And he went back inside the palace. And he questioned Jesus. "Where did you come from?" he asked Jesus. But Jesus gave him no answer. "Do you refuse to speak to me?" Pilate said. "Don't you realize I have power to either free you or to crucify you?" Pilate had the supreme authority in that situation. He's the one that is deciding the fate of Jesus. If he says not guilty, he can go free. Jesus is a free man. If he sides with the religious leaders and puts him to death, Jesus dies. Pilate is in complete control of what happens to Jesus in this situation. Well, not complete control, because Jesus could have walked on his own. He could have just disappeared. He could have called down the angels from heaven. He could have called his father to send lightning down to strike Pilate dead or something. He could have. Jesus was still really in control, but on earth, Pilate was the man in control. He said, "Don't you realize I have the power?" In verse 11, Jesus answered, "You would have no power over me if it were not given to you from above. Therefore, the one who handed me over to you is guilty of a greater sin." From then on, Pilate tried to set Jesus free. But the Jewish leaders kept shouting, "If you let this man go, you are no friend to Caesar. Anyone who claims to be a king opposes Caesar." When Pilate heard this, he brought Jesus out and sat down on the judge's seat at a place known as a stone pavement, which in Aramaic is Gabbatha. And it sounds like little baby talk, doesn't it? Gabba, 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 gabba. It was a day of preparation for the Passover, and it was about noon. "Here is your king," Pilate said to the Jews. He asked Jesus, "Who are you?" Jesus says, "I am who I say I am." So he brings him out and says, "Here is your king." But they shouted, "Take him away! Take him away! Crucify him!" "Shall I crucify your king?" Pilate asked. "We have no king but Caesar," the chief priests answered. Finally, Pilate handed him over to them to be crucified. So the soldiers took charge of Jesus. Carrying his own cross, he went out to the place of the skull, which in Aramaic is called Golgotha. There they crucified him, and with him 2 others, one on each side and Jesus in the middle. Pilate had a notice prepared and fastened to the cross. It read, "Jesus of Nazareth, the King of the Jews." Many of the Jews read this sign, for the place where Jesus was crucified was near the city. and the sign was written in Aramaic, Latin, and Greek. The chief priests of the Jews protested to Pilate, "Don't write the King of the Jews. Instead write, this man claimed to be the King of the Jews." But Pilate answered, "What I have written, I have written." Pilate knew who Jesus was. He knew that Jesus was the Messiah. Now, he wasn't really waiting for the Messiah. He's Roman, but he understood Jewish customs, Jewish beliefs. He knew that this was, in fact, he knew that Jesus was the Son of God. He had it set up. He had it written above him. This is the Messiah. This is the King of the Jews. Not he claimed to be. This is. He knew who he was, and he knew that he had the power to decide what would be done with Jesus. But even knowing the truth, he rejected Jesus and gave in to the angry mob. Maybe he was afraid that if he didn't give in to their demands, they would turn on him. But if he did really believe in Jesus, shouldn't he have been more afraid of rejecting Jesus than disappointing the mob? Jesus said in Luke chapter 12, verses 4 through 5, "I tell you, my friends, do not be afraid of those who kill the body, and after that can do no more. But I will show you whom you should fear. Fear him who, after your body has been killed, has the authority to throw you into hell." Yes, fear him. Which brings up another foolish thing that people do. There are people that claim to believe in heaven and hell, but live as if they don't exist. I had someone tell me a few months ago that they knew they were going to hell. And yet the way they said it, they seemed to be okay with it. It's like, yeah, I'm going to hell. So apparently they believe in hell. Why would you believe in hell and be okay with going there? Because if you believe in hell, you also believe in the alternative, heaven. And if you really understand the difference between heaven and hell, why would anybody say, I'm going to hell, but oh well? That's foolishness. I can't think of anything more foolish than believing in heaven and hell and believing in God, and yet just saying I'm going to hell. Oh well. But let's look quickly at another fool in the Easter story. His name was Judas Iscariot. Judas was one of Jesus' disciples. He had been with Jesus and he had witnessed all of the miracles. He had heard all of the teachings. He knew who Jesus was. He wasn't saying maybe he is. He knew who Jesus was. And yet, he was willing to sell him for 50 pieces of silver. Or 30 pieces of silver, excuse me. Can you imagine that? Knowing who Jesus is, knowing that he's God's son, knowing that he has the power of heaven and hell, knowing that really my life, what happens to me is up to him. And it's saying, I want 30 pieces of silver. When I was thinking about this, the first thing that popped into my mind was a scene from The Dark Knight. Batman, for some of you who've seen that. Some of you know where I'm going with this. The accountant figures out who Batman is. Figures out it's his boss, Bruce Wayne. So he comes into Lucius and he sits down with him and he starts laying out all the evidence. And he says, I figured out that this Batman, that very few people know who Batman is, I figured out who the Batman is. And if you want me to keep quiet, you're going to have to pay me. And I don't remember how much money, but, Bruce Wayne was multi-billionaire. You're going to have to pay me all this money to keep silent, or I'm going to go public with this, and I'm going to let everybody know who's the real Batman is. And Lucius looks across the table at him and says, so let me get this straight. You believe that your boss, one of the most powerful men in the world, is a vigilante who goes around at night and beats people to a pulp with his bare hands. And your plan is to blackmail him? Good luck with that. That's kind of what Judas did. Knowing who Jesus is, knowing that Jesus has the power of heaven and hell, knowing that ultimately his eternity rests in the fate of this man. And he says, I'm going to make money off of him. I'm going to blackmail him. How ridiculous is that? Now, I know a lot of you right now are saying, yeah, I agree. That was stupidity on Judas's part. I would never sell Jesus. I'm smarter than that. I'm not a fool. And yet people do it every day. Even those who claim to be following Jesus are more than willing to sacrifice their relationship with Jesus for a moment of pleasure. They know that Jesus wouldn't approve of something, but they do it anyway. They say, I know Jesus wouldn't like this, but you know what? He'll forgive me. I think I'll just go do that. I can ask forgiveness later. When we willingly do something that we know Jesus wouldn't approve of, we're just as guilty as Judas. We're selling out the Son of God for something that we believe is more important. For Judas, it was 30 pieces of silver. What is it for you? What are you willing to sell Jesus for? I love Jesus, but I love fill in the blank. I love Jesus, but I love more. I love Jesus, but I also love this. And I can't give all my allegiance to Jesus because I love this. I just can't let this go. We've been talking about that through our series, Not a Fan. See, fans are just there for the show. Followers say, you know what? I'm all in. I'm going to give everything. I'm not going to walk both sides of the fence. I believe in Jesus. I believe he's the Son of God. And I'm going to give it my all. No playing games. I'm not going to be a fool. I'm going all in for Jesus. May everybody bow your head and close your eyes. In a minute, we're going to transition to baptisms, and we've got some people that have decided they're ready to go all in for Jesus. And they're not ashamed to let the world know. If you're getting baptized at this time, you can get up and you can slip out of your seats and you can go ahead and move and start getting ready for that. Bridget will meet you back there. Jason will meet you back there and get you ready for that. But I just want to see, with nobody else looking around, I just like to see who's honest and who's brave enough to, nobody else is looking. It's just between you, me, and God, and I'm not going to tell everybody who you are. I just want to know that I can be praying with you. Who in this room would say, Pastor Jerry, I'm a Judas, or I'm a Pilate, or whatever. Maybe you say, until today, I never really realized. I never really stopped to think about who Jesus was. I mean, I'm just, going to church because it's Easter. That's what people do on Easter. But, I realize today he is the Son of God, and I need to accept him. Or maybe you're saying, you know what, I believed for a long time, but I've kind of been, having one foot on each side of the fence. I love Jesus, but I love something else more. And I'm always willing to sell out Jesus for this pleasure of mine. But today, I'm going to stop being a fool. Today, I'm going all in for Jesus. I'm going to believe him. I'm going to love him with my whole heart, all my mind, all my soul, and all my strength. No more playing games. It's me and Jesus all the way. If you're here and that's true of you, would you just slip your hand up so I can pray for you? Slip up your hand. We got one. Anybody else? 2, 3, 4, 5. Anybody else? Pastor Jerry, please pray for me. I've been playing games with Jesus. I haven't been serious. I believe in him, but I haven't been serious about my relationship. Once you slip your hand up and I recognize you can put it back down. Anybody else? I'm done playing games. I want to go all in for Jesus. He's more important than anything else in the whole world. One more hand right there. Anybody else? Last chance today. One more. There's another one. 8. Anyone else? Heavenly Father, I thank you for these 8 people who are honest this morning and brave. There may be others here who maybe wanted to raise their hand, but there was just something in them that wouldn't let them admit to me. Father, I pray that they'd at least admit to you, because it's not about me. Even this prayer that I'm saying right now, this doesn't do anything. Salvation is the decision we make in our hearts. But I pray for these 8 who were brave enough, and they said, Pastor, pray for me. They recognize that they're guilty of not following you 100%. They say they believe in you. They've always told people they believe, but they live their life as if they don't. Because there's certain things they just weren't willing to give up. And this morning they're saying, no more playing games. I'm all in. I'm not just going to be a fan of Jesus. I'm going to be a follower. And I pray that you would come in and you would solidify this decision they're making this morning. And I believe that you would turn their life around. That when they walk out of this place today, they would be a different person because they have met with you and they have given you complete control. I pray that you would help them to start thinking differently. I pray that you would begin to guide them, remind them when they're getting ready to slip into something, and don't let them say, oh, well, I know it's wrong, but I'm going to keep doing it. That's what they've been doing. Instead of say, no, I made a decision to follow Jesus, and nothing's going to get in my way. I'm not doing that because I know Jesus wouldn't approve. And if there's anyone else here this morning, Father, who should have raised their hand and didn't, I pray that just privately between them and you, they say a simple prayer and say, Jesus, I'm sorry for living life for me. I'm done living for myself. I'm done living for my friends. From now on, it's me and you, Jesus. All I want is you.